everyone. Thanks for joining me here at Ask a Black Girl, the podcast. Rana, why do you have a podcast, you ask? Actually, you didn't ask, but I'm going to tell you anyway. For many years, I've wanted to have a space where people can come together, talk, laugh, learn, be curious, all judgment-free. I know a lot of things, but I don't know everything. Don't tell my husband I said that. On this podcast, I like to ask experts, meaning people who have knowledge on topics and subjects, and I love learning from them. It's about being curious. On today's show, you'll get some new terminology to use at cocktail parties. We're going to talk about CSR. What is CSR? It stands for Corporate Social Responsibility. And my dear friend, Tai Duncan Atteberry, knows all about it. My friend Tai is the managing principal of Next Play Strategies, which is a Chicago-based consulting firm that focuses on social impact and external affairs. In this role, she works with a lot of nonprofits and business leaders across all industries. She previously served as the vice president of CSR, Corporate Social Responsibility, at Cresco Labs, which is a multi-state cannabis operator based in Chicago. I also has a law degree, lots of experience in the nonprofit, legal, and finance worlds. I can't wait to have this conversation with her. I can't wait for you to hear this conversation. Enjoy. Hi, Tai.
Hi, how are you? I'm doing great today. How are you doing?
Hanging in. Good thing there's no dress code here. I literally just finished a 90-minute yoga workout, so thank God you can't smell me.
I love that for you. I should probably do that myself with all the aging and all the things.
Yeah, maybe glasses will help me look more studious. So, tell me, where in the world do we find you? Coming from
today, I'm in Chicago at my home in Bucktown, and I'm sort of hiding out in our bedroom because my 2-year-old son will be arriving from the zoo soon. And so I had to get as far away as possible from all the sounds he will be making. So
for those folks who don't know us on this podcast, full disclosure, Tai is just one of my favorite people. We met pseudo through work many years ago, and we have kept in touch, and who knew we'd both be boy moms? Anywho, so you're joining us today because I came across a term a couple of months ago that I'm just curious about, and it's something that I should know, but I don't. And you mentioned it in one of our conversations, and that term is CSR, Corporate Social Responsibility. Yeah. So I'd love for you to explain your relationship to CSR itself is, and please feel free to define it while you're chatting.
Yeah, absolutely. So to start us out, corporate social responsibility, CSR, because it is one of the acronyms, but also a very sort of tough to say if you don't use the acronym. But it's really,
in this world, we have OPP, ADD, and that, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
alphabet soup. So CSR is really how companies take accountability for their impact on people and the planet. So it's evolved from that sort of feel-good philanthropy to something that is actually a business strategy. And it's something that creates long-term value for both communities and companies and builds trust and drives equity. So I think oftentimes people, especially in times that we're in right now, will say they're all the same: CSR, ESG, DEI, all of these sort of acronyms in corporate America. But they actually each have their own strategies that they should stand on. So CSR, and I'll also talk about ESG a bit, so environmental, social, and governance, those go together a bit more in the work that I've done. To me, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, stands on its own, a little bit separately. But in my experience, most recently, I spent 5.5 years running corporate social responsibility, public affairs for a large cannabis company based in Chicago called Cresco Labs. And I've been a lawyer for almost 17 years now.
What is it about, not just your professional background or your personal background, that you think placed you and many other people that practice CSR in this particular job category?
I think I was always going to be doing something with people and community. My parents were the folks who I always saw writing handwritten thank you cards when we would get things. They were always about giving back and volunteering on holidays and things. So I grew up in a household where it was not just about us living in our little bubble. We were always connected to other people, part of a larger ecosystem where we were all helping each other out, or we don't live in a vacuum. And so I think that's what drew me to the work, is that initially thinking that, okay, I can actually work with community groups, help support initiatives that are important to the neighborhoods in which our business operates, but also help a business to see the value in this work too. That it's not just a handout, it's not charity, it's a partnership, it's connectivity, it's showing that you actually care about the place where you do your business, people who are paying their hard-earned dollars to your business. And I think that companies that care about their people do better. And so I want to be part of that work.
So I love that you said, basically, you have an intrinsic sense of obligation, right? Or motivation to kind of help others. Like you were just raised with that.
Yeah, to whom much is given, much is expected. We're giving of our time and our resources, but in partnership with those who were looking for something that we were able to provide.
You said something really great. I should have written down that you said it was something like philanthropy to the boardroom, or what did you call it?
Oh, so that this idea that I think CSR used to be sort of this idea of like feel good philanthropy. Like, okay, we wrote a check or we bought a table at this gala and like our name was on the program and on the stage. And so, we did this thing and we gave. Oh, that's
for in March, people still trying to hit you up for a table.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's still, well, also, because that's sort of how we've trained nonprofits often to get their money. And it's still, there's certainly a place for that work. But I think that the idea that it's integrated into your business strategy is something that not everyone sees. When it's integrated, it's not just like a nice to have or sort of like an add-on, a charitable add-on. When it's part of your strategy, when it's part of how your employees engage, when it's part of why they want to work for your company, then you get better results. And there's more of a sustainability. You see oftentimes, we saw in 2020, a lot of companies committing to diversity, inclusion efforts when George Floyd was murdered. And then he was still murdered, but then, the times were still tough, but people sort of moved on. And if it's not part of your strategy, if it's not built into your annual planning, then you're not going to keep doing it when the cameras are not focused on you.
So what you're saying in smart girl terms is it's just not performative. It's authentic. In fact,
exactly.
You know that I started this Ask a Black Girl, not per se on a whim, right? It's something I wanted to do forever, even prior to 2020. But the reason I called it that, and I've kind of done it, is because when all the George Floyd thing happened and all of our friends, and I joked earlier, but you and I have diverse groups of friends. We happen to be married to white people. And I don't mind being an explainer to people, but when a lot of my girlfriends, most of them who were white, panicked and started doing what I felt was an correction, I said, listen, guys, let's hop on a Zoom and let's ask me questions for 90 minutes, essentially doing what I've done, right, my entire life, right? So I think it's interesting because it's almost like on one hand, I feel like it's a challenging job because you're the gatekeeper of that. But I'm sure you've probably been in situations in which you've had to lobby those internally to understand that what you're doing is important. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, that's true. And I think I struggled for a while to explain my career trajectory because it felt more like a jungle gym than a ladder, as Sheryl Sandberg has said, that it wasn't like a clear, you go to law school and you work in a firm and then this and this and this. I wanted to do different things. And so I realized that some of that was because I was attracted to certain types of leadership and certain types of corporate structures too. And so I might, go into financial services after practicing law. I mean, I had no background in that really, but I met John Rogers here in Chicago, who runs Ariel Investments, and which is sort of the beginning of how the two of us met. And I thought he was just he was so different. He cared about people and communities and initiatives, and he cared about things that I had not seen other CEOs really care about in that way. And so some of my career trajectory was in part based on the fact that I like working for people who understand it already. I don't have to explain to them why it matters to be a government.
Because I say this all the time, living now in the leafy Northeast, I'm like, all great things start in the Midwest, particularly Chicago, right?
Yes.
We got
Yes,
it all.
ma'am.
But I would argue also that the world is full of a lot of people that are lawyers that actually want to do something else.
Yes. Well, that's the driving factor also, right? So it's like, I was definitely attracted to a certain type of leadership, but certainly the key was not practicing law full time. Like I went to law school to learn how lawyers think. And then that's what I got out of it. That was the best thing I got out of it. So I think the ability also to explain why this work matters. Like if I'm faced with someone who doesn't necessarily understand it, it's not always the leadership. Sometimes it's the person internally that you need to unlock to get the thing done at a more like local level. I think CSR is partially risk management. People often think about it as like, oh, this soft and, it's hard, it's not tangible, but like actually it is risk management. It's employees expect it. There are customers that definitely reward and punish, companies who are not doing the right thing. And so it can be difficult to explain to people who are intent on not understanding you why it matters. But I do think that more often than not, explaining it in business terms help. It's like, all right, well, you're part of this community, right? Your neighbors need to understand that you're the best person that they could be going to for XYZ service that you provide. Yes, right. You have a great product, but how do you show that you're more than just a product? Because anyone can make a great, thing to.
Right.
So how do you set yourself apart? How do you have your employees have more loyalty to you? How do you have your customers have more loyalty to you? So all of these things, I think you can make a case based on who it is, but the case is rarely like, because it makes your heart feel good, even though it does. Yeah.
So before I move on, I just want to say, kids, it's great to go to law school. That's not bad.
It's not
and
bad.
I can relate.
It's expensive.
What it's like being at a cocktail party at Christmas and not being able to explain to the people you love what you do.
Yes.
So I want to circle back to what we both alluded to about this particular topic coming on people's radars post George Floyd, which one could argue was kind of the turning point for a lot of things. I remember around that time being a little frustrated because I felt that there was a little bit of an overcorrection going on. And this is where I have to date myself. I'm technically a geriatric millennial or an exennial, depending on who we are, right?
Yes.
And I remember saying at the time, part of the reason these kids, and sorry guys, by these kids, I would say Gen Z, and I'm generalizing here, but a lot of people is that, first of all, COVID was something none of us had ever been through, obviously. And I felt like it was our World War II. Our grandparents were part of that greatest generation. And because of the screens, unfortunately, all comes back to that, right? People see more injustice and all that kind of stuff, but this stuff has always existed. I mean, for me, it's not that I wasn't upset by what we saw or what people were figuring out. I was like, listen, my grandparents, I had to pull it out of them, but they saw people hanging from trees. That didn't define their life, right? I'm not saying that we need to suppress, but that is an unfortunate part of life that we also want to push back against. I remember reading that the Coinbase CEO, like around that time, and the reason it sticks out of my mind is because he was basically the first one to listen, and people feel free to Google it if you'd like, but he basically was saying, listen, this is terrible, and I empathize, and we're here for you, and we have ESG groups, but this is work. This is not a therapy session. We need to focus on the work. And to be honest, I remember at the time being like, bravo, right? Like, and trust me, I'm a yogi. I'm all about people's mental health, all that. But like, I thought I applauded him when he did that. What's the difference between that and then now this, what a lot of people would consider to be an attack on wokeism or whatever it is. And by the way, I miss woke being just a fun word that you would use because your dad knew about skinny jeans. I miss that. But do you understand what I'm saying in a very, very roundabout way?
Yeah, I think the difference is there are companies who already had CSR initiatives in place, and again, I'll separate because I think that the challenge is that everyone lumps all the things that are nice to have that they don't think really matter together. CSR, ESG, DEI. So like, if we have to budget cut, we just pick those things up and toss them away. And that's how people operate. A lot of people do. So I will separate them. I think they're different things. I think if you already have an infrastructure where your company values the connection to the community and you already have initiatives like volunteering, and you have corporate philanthropy initiatives, and you have strategic partnerships that you're working on where you're listening to your customers and to your community members and trying to serve their needs in alignment with your values and your business goals. If that's already happening, and there's a tragedy, then you pivot onto how to specifically navigate that tragedy within the framework you already have. So for example, when we was at Cresco, we already had the framework there. And so in a sort of effort to figure out what do, we did a volunteer initiative. Now, does volunteering fix murdering Black people for no reason? No, right? But I think in the middle of a pandemic, when you're a cannabis company and then you have a history of the war on drugs is part of who you are, that your work in improving equity and your work in sort of serving community is important. And so we didn't have to create a new thing to do, but we decided to do it through volunteering, is to do 500 hours of volunteering to get our community, our employees out in some way, whether it was online or was doing community work, even though it was the pandemic, to show that we cared still about people, about humanity, and that we were still giving back. We just chose to provide lunch every day to our employees working at the dispensaries and the cultivation and production facilities, because they were still going into, the office every day. And so the vision there was to then source that lunch from predominantly women and minority-owned businesses that were local. And so that was sort of the way that we decided to engage, was like, we're going to help keep the businesses open by ordering lunch, but also show our employees that we care about them. It didn't feel performative because we already had infrastructure that we were just shifting a little bit to show alignment and support for something else.
I told my friends to stop putting Black Lives Matter signs out front of their house. Your kid is friends with my kid. That's enough.
You already believed it, then you already believed it. I think the idea of like, there's two things happening, right? The Black Lives Matter signs are showing the support. Either you're saying you're safe here, you're showing that you're an ally. Like, you should show it through your actions too, right? That's the most important part. But if you're putting the sign out to show that you're
when my child's walking through,
yes,
a subdivision, which I would argue my neighbors, for all of the challenges of where I live, I think they do a great job of that.
Yeah.
But I want to move on, because that's all great. What you guys did was great, but let's fortunately or unfortunately come to 2025. Everybody's tired, right? Like, I roll my eyes when I see a commercial that's like, oh, this is why we're such a loving company, or just like talking about this stuff, or even a lot of the buzzwords that you've used in talking about some of this. For majority people, I feel like they're just going to get turned off. Like, I don't want to hear any more about this. What do we do about that? Because I would imagine the work is still important. Things are still happening in our world. What is the fix? How do we move forward?
Well, I think that it's more important now than ever. I think it's back to sort of the separation, that people feel like they're afraid to care about humanity, which I think is the saddest thing, especially here in America. It breaks my heart that we are like, oh, screw other people. That interconnectedness has to continue to exist.
But let me ask you this. I know what you're saying, but would some people feel, well, it's not that I don't care about other people. It's just that I'm trying to live my life, and I feel there's been too much emphasis on that. Do you know what I'm saying?
Is the world fixed though? Like, it's like, and that's my response, is that I think companies and people have fatigue, in part because they pumped a lot of resources into initiatives and the world is still not better necessarily, right? So I think that that's part of the fatigue, is that they're like, well, we did all this work, it still sucks here. Like, why are we still doing this? Well, because there's still more work to do. And also, if you don't do it strategically and meaningfully, if you just do it sort of, as you were saying, it was performative, then you don't really bring about change. So I think that part of it is just a shift from writing a check or putting up a Black Lives Matter sign is not enough. And so CSR still matters, but it matters in more strategic ways that actually like help the business. Those who say, I don't want to spend money on this, like, well, actually, this is partially risk mitigation. It's reputational, regulatory, and operational risk mitigation. It's talent recruitment, and it's also trying to keep those employees staying at your company, not going somewhere else. Consumer trust and loyalty. Investors care about this stuff. And so there are ways to frame it that show people, even if you feel fatigued, then let's do it differently. Let's not stop doing it, because it still matters and it's still necessary. Because that's part of what happened with George Floyd, is that people put money at stuff right away, but it wasn't part of their annual planning. So they didn't have recurring fees or strategies set up for these things. And so I think that at this point, there was an overcorrection, and it wasn't done thoughtfully. It was like very reactionary.
I mean, we've talked more about 2020, which I'd like to forget, but now we've got new challenges in 2025. If I am a C-suite executive in a different environment, by the way, with different types of people coming in, even young people feel whether it's right or wrong, they might feel that they've been preached to. They might feel like they had to eat all this at university and beyond, and don't want to have to, as they're evaluating companies, might not want to have to deal with it. What are you seeing, actually? Let me ask you, what are you seeing in corporate America right now in terms of the attitude of executives, and then in terms of entry level through middle management on these topics?
I think that employees still care. I mean, I think it depends on the industry, depends on the level, of course, but I try to do listening tours periodically, no matter what the job is that I'm in, to just talk to people from different walks of life. So, are you the business owner? Are you the nonprofit leader? Are you the consumer who doesn't have any ties to the business otherwise, and try to understand what people want? And I think people want to believe that corporations aren't evil. They want to believe, they want to make, you see what happened with Target. I mean, people want to make choices with their dollars.
So for folks that might not be familiar with the whole Target situation, can you explain the facts on that case?
Yeah, so in sort of the high level is that Target was very reactionary when President Trump said no more DEI. I mean, a lot of companies, schools, you're seeing it across the country. You're trying to navigate, how do we stay in good favor with our government, and also do business. And so Target was very quick to be like, all right, we're out of DEI. We're not doing that anymore. And again, that doesn't mean they don't do CSR work, but certainly that take impacted consumers. There were several boycotts and many of them are ongoing. And so Target saw an immediate more than $12 billion drop in their market value. And could be other things, sure, but that feels like a big drop for an immediate, the first couple months of the year.
Just playing devil's advocate, was that isolated? Has that been generally effective? Because I'll tell you that Target thing in particular, so now you're reminding me, that was a big debate. My family just loves to debate things. And I remember saying to my parents, like, that's really cute. And I know baby boomers in particular, that's what you guys like to do, but is that really going to make an impact to the bottom line into the long-term strategy? Because that's an interesting story for those who were looking to get a result. That's great for them. But I've also seen plenty of situations out there across not just retail, be it journalism, whatever it is, where the opposite has happened. Is it sustainable and effective?
So I think it's effective in that it makes companies, so if a consumer votes with their dollar and says, I'm only going to spend dollars, or I'm going to mostly spend dollars with companies that I think have values that align with my own, or I'm going to at least take money away from those companies that clearly don't align with my values. I do think that has an impact, because at the end of the day, the CEO's leadership is beholden to the shareholders. And so if they're a publicly traded company and their market share is decreasing, if their value is decreasing, they have some explaining to do. And so if they can make it up other ways, then maybe it's not a big deal. But at the end of the day, they don't want to be losing money. Companies are going to be forced to figure it out. Either you're going to re-up and do something different and show you care, or you're going to just realize that people are done with you and you have to make your money a different way.
You're at a cocktail party and you've got two people in front of you, and let's assume they understand what it is you do. What do you say to the person that is pro CSR, and what do you say to the person that is anti CSR?
So the person who's pro CSR, I'm like, cool. We talk for a long time about how much fun we have helping communities and helping businesses to do better and make more of a long-lasting impact. Person who's against it, I ask them why. Because at the end of the day, you hear things like, it's taking away from our bottom line. Okay, but how do you point to that? Because oftentimes the benefit that you get from a dollar spent in CSR is bigger than what you're going to get, what you're actually going to lose. Like, you're able to send out volunteers. It costs you maybe some hours for them not working, but the impact that those employees will have from being in that space, giving of their time and energy, connecting with their community and each other, like, you're getting that back. It's interwoven into the business strategy, and you can show that there is a return on that investment. And that's what we have to get better as CSR, as a community, of showing the ROI. 'Cause it's harder with CSR sometimes to quantify the impact. And so I think being able to explain what that impact looks like in dollars and cents is hugely helpful for people to be able to understand the value of CSR. Explaining what DEI, why that is important, is its own bucket. We know companies that have diverse leadership do better. And there's tons of stats we could point to about why DEI matters in the workplace.
So is this unique? My question is, on some of those stats, is that uniquely an American thing or is it a global thing? See, this is why I think I was telling you, my husband's from the UK. We were at a wedding this past weekend, and I ran into a woman who does CSR, and she lives like in Aberdeen, Scotland. So yeah, I thought it was very interesting. Now, unfortunately, there was too much alcohol flowing for me to get into like an in-depth conversation with her. I was already the high maintenance American who actually left to go back to the hotel during cocktail hour because there was no AC. However, I'm curious that she used the term CSR. Is this a global thing? And if so, where is it headed? This might be a good time for you to explain the three terms that I think people watching might need to leave here with. Like, what's CSR, what's ESG, and what's DEI? Because I assume it's somehow related that way.
Yeah, so I think CSR actually is probably more evolved a bit over outside of the United States, honestly, because there are more global standards and frameworks that we don't always adhere to, whereas other companies, where they're more adhered to it in other parts of the world. So I think when it comes to CSR, anyone who's in the profession, I think will talk about it sort of universally in that way. What it means to them may be a little bit different. So I think of CSR, corporate social responsibility, and ESG, environment, social, and governance, as being more linked. Like CSR is the overarching larger strategy that includes employee volunteering and corporate philanthropy and giving and those sort of things. But then there's also this piece where you're looking at the environment, so your sustainability initiatives, social, which includes DEI, which is a diversity, equity, inclusion. And so there's the ESG sort of takes all the things, puts them together, but somehow in my mind they're under the same CSR umbrella. So that's how I at least think about it. But the environmental piece of it, the social piece of it. So the social would also include sort of your employee wellness and those sort of things too. Right. And then the governance, sort of the, how your company is governed. And so that's political contributions and those kind of things too. And so ESG and the CSR, those things sort of together are globally a norm. And so the UN Global Compact has over 20,000 participants in 167 countries, and that guides companies on human rights, labor, environmental practices, and anti-corruption. Yeah. So there are certainly infrastructures around the world where people are held to these certain standards. So Global Reporting Initiative, GRI, is used by only over 78% of the world's biggest companies. And so those are reporting CSR and ESG data. So I think the diversity piece of it may fall underneath the social and the ESG.
See, I think that's going to be so interesting because just as someone who's in Europe at least once a year, I would argue they're ahead of us on some of the stuff. But again, yes, seeing what's happening, post-Brexit with the UN politically over there, that could evolve, particularly with the issue of immigration, right?
I will be interested to hear what the friend that you met when you were in the UK, like what the perspective is over there. Because I do think that from an ESG standpoint, we do look outside of the US for those standards, and so they've set the standards. And so I think that we have been in the US, in my opinion, a little bit more on the feel good side. Yeah. And we have not been as focused on the metrics. And so the real measurable action that's driven by investor demand, I see that more internationally than I see in the US. Like it's easy to just discard it if it feels like it's just, like, does your heart feel good about it? It's hard to discard it if you have a measurable standard that you have to report against.
So I'm not going to say last question because my neurodiverse brain does like a machine gun type thing. So I'm going to hear my last 15 questions.
Yes.
All in one. Is there anything else folks should know about CSR, either for the professional or personal lives we haven't discussed? And what are you working on now in the future that you're excited about related to this topic?
I will say, I think I've sort of said it here and there, but I think those who are working in this space, I want to encourage people to not give up because it can feel like, well, no one cares about people anymore. So why, our jobs are going to be extinct. And like some companies are certainly cutting budget there. That's definitely happening, but the work is still important. And so I think the key is to show while you are at a place where they still have it and they still care about it, to show the return on investment of the work that you're doing. And I think it can feel kind of icky.
If people care, is there like, I don't, there's not a CSR association. Like where do people go to learn more about what's happening with that?
Well, I think there are a lot of different associations, whether it's like local ones or ones, I think CSR professionals are everywhere. We
Mhm.
have been for a long time. And so I think, whether you're finding a group that's local to you for support and for encouragement, there's a lot more online content too, with more webinars and those sort of things people could be tuning into to learn more and feel more in community. So if there's not anyone in your company or near you, you can actually talk to other people and learn from who's doing what where. I also find that we tend to be a more openly sharing community. And so whereas your friends maybe who are on the marketing team don't share brand secrets, like I've talked to people at different companies all the time about how are you engaging your volunteers, or sort of, what are some things that you're working on that you feel are actually meaningful, or
Collaborative.
yes,
It's
more
like the
collaborative.
Montessori school of your professional life. I love it.
Yeah. I think
Right?
also the engagement of community too, because I think that so often it feels like CSR sits in its own island, whereas it should be more interwoven into what the marketing and brand teams are doing, what your communication strategy is. And so part of what I think people miss out on too is that you create third-party validators by the work that you do. And so it's not as awkward as like you telling how great you are feels awkward. But when you have an ongoing community partnership with a nonprofit or, different organization, they
Right.
are now the third-party validators that you actually do what you say you will do. And they're in the community telling your story with and for you.
And what are you working on right now that you're excited about?
So I am embarking on my own business venture.
Ooh,
So that's pretty exciting. So I'm the managing principal of Next Play Strategies, which is a Chicago-based business strategy consultancy. And
okay.
so I'm very excited about helping businesses at the intersection of their strategy and social impact to make a
We'll
difference
have
in
info in
communities.
the show notes about that later, people. Amazing. Well, Tai Duncan Atteberry, responsible person, boy mom, lawyer, professional. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. And you'll have to come back in the future. Let us know how things are doing.
Love to. Thanks for having me. It's been so great to talk to you.
Thanks, Tai.
Now, you might recall that last year, the summer of 2024, Paris held the Olympics, a wonderful Olympics. There were a few controversies, though. The first controversy was drag queens. Wow, drag queens in Paris. Who would have thunk? Those drag queens happened to be performing near the beautiful River Seine, which flows through Paris. Another semi controversy there was the fact that there were athletes who had to swim in that river, which wasn't the cleanest. It was cleaner than it had been, but they basically had not gotten it as clean as it needed to be. A few athletes got sick. Well, here's the good news. As of summer 2025, an over $2.5 billion project has been completed in Paris. The River Seine is clean. Why is that a big deal? It's inspired a larger project which will benefit all of Paris and beyond. There are now 14 swimming areas and extensions of the Seine River that will be opened up that will be lovely for public consumption. Most importantly, it's symbolic. It's the reclaiming of an asset that historically was one of the most beautiful things about Paris that had gone a bit awry. Now it's a public asset. It's a beautiful place where people can enjoy nature, can enjoy each other, enjoy the outdoors. So there you go, folks. Next time you're in Paris, strap on your Goyard bikini, hop on in. But seriously, in this day and age where we're all looking for opportunities to get outside more and connect with each other, what a wonderful vintage asset. Thank you so much for joining me today on Ask a Black Girl, the podcast. Feel free to reach out via Instagram or email me at rana@askablackgirlthepodcast.com. Have a great day.